Hello, Dr. Danielle Conway of Verity Pet Nutrition here. Our very first video in the new year is going to focus on how to determine if information that you see online or hear from anybody is a valid source of information, or if it's information that's worth holding on to and making decisions on, or if you should just be casting it aside and moving along with your day. There's a series of 8 questions that I want you to ask yourself whenever you come across a post online or hear a piece of information from anybody. 1 is, where did you see or hear this information? Is it social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook? That's not a reliable source of information. Was it a blog? That is also usually not a reliable source of information. News or a website? Again, questionable sources of information. Now, was it a journal article or a textbook? Those are valid, very reliable sources of information. Was the person an expert? Was it an expert source information? Then that is a great source of information. Or was the expert directly involved within the source? Now, the more removed it is from a textbook or an expert, the more likely the information is going to get warped. I see this happen all the time, but it's like the game of telephone that we used to play as children, where you'd whisper the secret into someone next to you and it would go around the circle. And by the time it got to the end and the person said it out loud, then usually the sentence that was uttered originally was very different from the one that gets uttered at the very end. And that can happen to information all the time that you see on the internet. It starts as something valid, and it gets very blown out of proportion and twisted and warped to the information that reaches you, unfortunately, as a social media post. So hopefully that is helpful for kind of where did you see or hear the information. Now, the second question I want you to ask is, who is saying it? We already touched on this a little bit in the last question, but do they have credentials? So, for example, if it's a new piece of nutrition information, the very best source of information are people with a PhD in dog and cat nutrition, if you're looking for dog and cat nutrition. Now, if you're looking for cow or ruminant nutrition, then that person should have a PhD or master's degree or veterinary degree specialization in the species of intent. Now, a lot of people will assume that just because somebody has an advanced degree, a PhD, even a veterinary degree, that they're automatically an expert in every field. No, not true at all. And the more that person is a true expert, the more intellectual humility they will have, and they will be willing to say, that's not my area of expertise. And if you ask them a question, whether they got their PhD in ruminant nutrition, and you ask them a question about carnivore nutrition, dog or cat nutrition, they should say, that's not my area of expertise, because they are more likely to misunderstand information than somebody who has a degree in the appropriate field. Now, do they work with animals or research nutrition professionally? And people who have a master's degree in nutrition or some of the or PhDs have some of the very most brilliant minds within their area of expertise. Their area of expertise is very niched, and it is very specific. So when you get a PhD, you get a master's degree, usually your field of study is something very specific. Proteins in cats, vitamin D, dogs, and you're the expert within that very niched area. And that is the person that you want to go to get all of your vitamin D information about a dog, or all of the protein metabolism information about a cat. Now, are they trying to sell you something? That's a question that is fair and also requires a certain level of sensitivity, because we all need to make a living. Unfortunately, the majority of us were not born into wealth, do not have a trust fund, and we have to work to pay off our student loans. We have to work to keep the lights on in our areas of work. And so we can't work for free. And so it is absolutely fair that somebody would ask or need to be compensated for that information. Now, if the piece of information you're getting is someone trying to sell you something, not necessarily that you shouldn't take that information to heart. However, you should take it with a grain of salt, and just make sure you can fact check it or back it up with other reliable sources, other expert sources of information. Now, the fourth question we should be asking is, does this align with, does it line up with or agree with, or does it contradict what you've already learned? Did you hear a piece of information on social media that goes against what your veterinarian or against what your medical provider is telling you to do? Is someone starting the whole reel by saying, let me let you in on a little secret that the veterinary industry doesn't know, or I'm going to tell you something that nobody else has shared with you before. Though that is intended to incite mistrust and is a logical fallacy. We'll get into logical fallacies in a later video, but it's designed to sow seeds of mistrust to get you to not trust sources of misinformation and get you to trust them. Now, the dangerous thing about that is because their information, they can't back it up, and they're telling you don't trust anybody else. They're trying to plant the seeds of conspiracy theory. There is no way to validate what their claims are. And that's on purpose. They don't want you to validate their claims because they can't be validated. And so it's really important that information you hear aligns with what we call the greater scientific consensus. So you don't just do one study, you have multiple studies that back up a particular opinion or a particular fact. Now, an opinion is someone's belief. A fact is something that has been proven multiple times by science to be true. There's a very big difference between those two things. Now, when you hear that piece of information and it doesn't match, you can then ask, why is this drastically different with no explanation? Remember that bold claims require bold evidence. The bigger and the bolder the claim, the more evidence the source should be providing. The fifth question is, can it be validated? Can it be backed up? Are they just spouting off big claims without any sort of backing? Or are they trying to back it up? Now, what's dangerous now is there's a whole lot of research washing going on, and we'll cover that in a later episode. What research washing is, someone will say, oh, studies show, or even throw a study up, and that individual doesn't have enough of a science background, like they usually have a marketing background, and don't know how to interpret studies, or they call themselves a science nerd or data junkie, and they don't have an advanced professional degree, they don't have a master's degree, and they don't have a PhD within the area that they're claiming to be know all the things. And there's gurus on Facebook and social media who do this all the time, and they're very, very believing. They're very charming, they're very charismatic, and they sound very convincing. They use logical fallacies, they use appeal to emotion to appeal to your guilt and your love of your pet, to kind of align you with them and get you to believe what they're saying over and above what the greater scientific consensus says. And it's really, really dangerous. So we need to make sure it can be validated. And if you don't have a science degree, now in Unbiased Bites, I break down and teach the members how to interpret studies. Now, that's hard to do without an advanced degree, but we learn the basics. And one thing you can do at home is simply ask an expert that you trust if this piece of information is legit, or if this study actually makes the claims that the individual is saying it does. Usually when I pick up a study that some bold person is making on the internet and I skim it real quick, I say, oh, that's BS. That is not what this study says that they are saying it does, 9 times out of 10. So ask another expert what they think. The sixth question is, are there logical fallacies or heuristics being used? Now, heuristic is a jump that our brain will make to try to simplify information. It's the way our brains are wired. Our brains are always trying to simplify a very complex world around us. And so it is very normal for our brain to look for patterns, to shortcut, and make the information more easy to assimilate and understand. However, complex subjects are complex for a reason. Physiology, dog and cat nutrition, it is complicated. Our bodies, living beings are complicated. And anybody who's trying to tell you it's not lacks the expertise to be able to break it down and explain it to you. So they just lead you through that with logical fallacies, which is misinformation. So for example, they'll use appeal to emotion. If you love your dog, or if you love your cat, or if something's making you feel a certain way, which is actually the next question that we'll ask, they're using a logical fallacy. If they're attacking someone and saying, oh, they're a shill, or they're just saying that because the X, Y, or Z company is paying them to say that, bandwagon, they're trying to get you on their side at kind of any cost. Just trust me, you won't hear this from anyone else. There's a lot of logical fallacies out there that are being used. Now, we talk a lot more about logical fallacies in Unbiased Bites group, and we'll have a whole episode in the podcast, on the Nuance podcast, and here talking about logical fallacies just unto themselves. So the second step, or second question, is to ask yourself, how does that information make you feel? Or after watching that little video or that reel or that TikTok, how did it make you feel? If it made you feel an intense emotion, if it made you feel guilt, if it made you feel shame, if it made you feel angry, that's probably rage bait. That's not on purpose. It's to make you feel a certain way, to make you act. That is unfortunately, the type of videos and reels and social media posts that are going to trigger the algorithm the best, to get the most clicks, get the most likes, get the most views. People are going to watch all the way through the video, And that's going to be what's promoted within the algorithm. So people are turning more and more to using appeals to emotion and logical fallacies and rage bait to improve their performance on social media. So if it makes you feel panic, if it makes you feel angry, if it makes you feel fearful, if it makes you feel guilty, then that's probably by design. And a really easy way to check that is to show it to someone else and ask them how it makes them feel. If they get angry too, if they feel guilty too, if they feel shame as well, then that post, probably just scroll on by or don't keep reading, because they're trying to elicit a strong emotion out of you to get you to buy something, to get you to align with their views. Now, you shouldn't have to use intense emotion to explain facts or even to sell something to someone. That's cheating. Emotional manipulation, unfortunately, is a very common tactic in pseudoscience, because you stop asking questions once you feel those big emotions. Those big emotions kick you out of the prefrontal cortex in your brain and into your reptilian brainstem, so that you stop asking the important questions that you need to maintain in your big thinking primate brain. They push you back into your reptile brain. So they're doing that on purpose. They're using those big emotions to push you out of your critical thinking brain and into your more reptilian brain. So we need to prevent that from happening and stay in our big primate brain and ask those hard questions. And the final step is, can you ask that person questions? And what happens when you do? So when you say, what are your sources? What are your resources? Where did you get that information? How can you back that up? Where's the proof in the pudding? They should respond, if they're a professional, which they should be, they should respond with respect. They should respond with thoughtful explanation. And that might sometimes be, go to this book, or go read this on your own, because free information on the internet is not where we should be getting our information from exclusively. It's a great source for the start to get going, but we should not be relying on it exclusively. Do they admit when they don't know something? Do they say, that's outside of my area of expertise? Or, great question. Or even simply, that's a wonderful question, I can't answer it for you. Please talk to your medical care team. Because a true professional is not going to overstep and provide advice that could be misconstrued, which can easily happen in a short social media post. That would be a more appropriate long discussion with your medical care team. Or the opposite of that would be if they double down and act like every expert in every species in the field, or if they try to cast doubt or turn you against the real experts in that area. That should be an automatic red flag to turn and walk away. Remember that confidence is easy. Intellectual humility is earned through hard work and blood and sweat and tears in the academic system. Now, another really great way to check quick is Google Scholar. Don't Google Scholar everything, don't Google it, but Google Scholar, and you can just quickly search the phrase that the person uttered. And if you can find a bunch of studies that seem like they back it up, that's probably at least a reasonable source of information, or that warrants double checking with a professional. Now, your final gut check is, do you feel pressured? Do you feel confused? Do you feel emotionally spun up? Press pause. If it feels like a pressure cooker, it probably is. Truth doesn't rush you. I hope that was helpful. And if you would like more information, you like this, you enjoyed this, it was helpful, please consider joining Unbiased Bites, the membership, the community, where we talk about how to evaluate pet product companies and what to look for in pet product companies, what questions to ask, how to evaluate them, and make them earn a spot in your pet's bowl or in your pet's wellness care. Also consider looking out for the courses that will be coming out soon, and also consider listening to the Nuance podcast and a very special, soon to be released podcast as well with a very special guest. Happy truth seeking.